Walking Distance was always my favorite Twilight Zone episode. Now, it's very interesting about Walking Distance. It's not the most famous episode. Whenever you ask people about their most famous or their favorite episode, the episodes that come to mind are Time Enough at Last, where Burgess Meredith is in the vault when this nuclear bomb goes off, or the one with William Shatner on the plane when he sees the gremlin on the wing, or Eye of the Beholder. It's not one of the most famous Twilight Zone episodes. Out of 156 episodes, I would put Walking Distance into the category of when you ask people about it, they're not quite sure whether or not they've seen it. People will say, the story sounds familiar, I'm not quite sure. So it's sort of what I would say, at least in terms of fame, it's on a second tier. But Walking Distance, out of 156 Twilight Zone episodes, is always ranked in the top 10 of popularity, whether it's in Time Magazine poll when it celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Twilight Zone, up to today on science fiction magazines. Walking Distance has an enormous amount of resonance with people. And all of my life, I felt that Rod Serling had written the episode especially for me. And in fact, Rod Serling wrote the episode as the most personal episode about himself. Walking Distance is about nostalgia. And nostalgia, this longing for the past, can be such a strong feeling sometimes that it's almost a pathology. Now, I've always had that feeling of someone who's dealing with the busyness and the stress of life, of this longing for my childhood, longing for one's childhood, a time when there was no stress, a time when the biggest worry you had in the world was whether or not the Mets were going to win the ball game that day. And this is a feeling of nostalgia, of longing for the past, of longing for a simpler, happier time that can really be overwhelming in people. Walking Distance obviously involves a man who is very stressed out on life and seemingly through the power of his own will goes back to the simpler time of his childhood. Now, for example, this is from the Twilight Zone Companion, Mark Scott Zicree, little plug for Mark's book. And this is what Mark says about Walking Distance. Okay? And he's quoting Buck Hooton here, who was producer of the Twilight Zone. I think probably Walking Distance was as good as any we made. Okay? Now, Rod Serling himself said, not long ago, I was walking on a set at MGM when I suddenly hit by the similarity of it to my hometown. Feeling an overwhelming sense of nostalgia, it struck me that all of us have a deep longing to go back. Not to our home as it is today, but as we remember it. It was from this simple incident that I wove the story of Walking Distance. Walking Distance is a very special episode for several reasons as it distinguishes itself from other Twilight Zone episodes. Number one, it's one of the very few, remember, out of 156 Twilight Zone episodes, it's one of the very few that has its own original music by Bernard Herrmann. The other Twilight Zone episodes, for the most part, just use stock music. This music was written specifically for this episode, and it is absolutely magnificent as Bernard Herrmann captures this wistful feeling of memories, of longing for the past. One other thing that distinguishes the episode is that it is one of the few in which Rod Serling physically does not appear. But what's interesting about that dichotomy, while Rod Serling does not appear, he has three separate narrations. He has the beginning narration that he always has, then right in the middle of the episode, after its return from commercial, is when the lead character realizes he's back in time, and Serling opens that scene, and then of course the closing narration, which is one of the most eloquent you will ever hear. I do have to say something about Gig Young, the actor who played the original lead in the original Twilight Zone, the Martin Sloan character. Gig Young did perhaps what is the finest acting performance in the history of television. Now, while that may only be my opinion, I would add that 9 years after Gig Young played Martin Sloan in this episode, he did win an Academy Award, Best Supporting Actor for a movie called They Shoot Horses, Don't They? So it was fitting that this great actor, 9 years later, did win an Academy Award. And of course, what else is really significant is that to this day, Gig Young is best remembered for Walking Distance, more so than he is for the movie for which he won the Academy Award. And of course, the acting, where Gig Young so much is longing for the past, and this great sorrow that he feels, was maybe something deep inside of Gig Young, who tragically, of course, himself years later met his own unfortunate and tragic end. What else distinguishes Walking Distance from other Twilight Zone episodes is that Walking Distance does not have the usual Rod Serling vintage twist ending, those twist endings that Rod Serling has become famous for. Walking Distance is a straightforward drama from beginning to end. Now, it is quite true that the lead character does go back in time, but he goes back in time basically through the force of his own will. There are no time machines, there are no space aliens, there's nothing about the episode that is particularly having to do with science fiction or gadgets or anything like that. It is a straightforward drama, and it is, as I said, the greatest of all Twilight Zone episodes, which is ironic since it does not have some of the usual Serling staples of the Twilight Zone. It was really a remarkable experience in putting together this remake of Walking Distance, because I went back to the house, to the home I was born in and grew up in and was raised in. And I hadn't been back in 30 years. And I went one day after work, dressed in a jacket and tie, a stranger, and I rang the bell. So you can just imagine the new owners of the house. I had no idea who they were. I'd never met them. And I rang the bell, and I spoke to Marie Cruz, and I told her everything I was doing, and could I possibly use the house for the filming of this Twilight Zone episode. So imagine anybody's reaction when you ring the bell, a stranger asking if you can use their home for the filming of a Twilight Zone episode, telling them that you grew up in the house. And she was very nice to me. We spoke at length, maybe for 15 minutes, and she said, well, the actual owner of the house is my mother, who's not back from work yet, so can you come back in about an hour? So I said, sure. I went back about an hour and a half later, and the owner of the house, Mrs. Santana, Mara Cruz Santana, had already heard the story from her daughter. She was so nice to me. She brought me in the house. They showed me all around. It was really like entering the past, and they were so nice. And then I guess it was about 6 weeks later that we actually went back with the camera crew and filmed there. So you can just imagine what it was like for me to be filming this episode on the block in the actual house I grew up in, seeing the actors who were playing my mother and my father and my grandmother and my sister right in front of the house. I'm so grateful to the Cruz family and to the Santana family for letting me back there and using the house I grew up in. It was an amazing feeling. Walking Distance, in addition to being the most personal and favorite Twilight Zone episode for me, also needed a cast. And I really need to talk about how I went about casting the parts in this episode. I cast people who were not professional actors. I cast them because I liked them, because they reasonably fit the part, and because they had the personalities, not because they were necessarily professional actors. All of the actors, with the exception of Kenny Schaefer and Kimberly Arnott Weidman, are all from this community, my hometown of Ridgewood and the surrounding areas. Now, when I needed someone to play my father, I went right to Kenny. Kenny looks like my father. He has a similar personality as my father. And if this could ever happen, if I would ever actually go back in time to the time when I was a 10-year-old child and my parents were there at that age and didn't recognize me as their son 35 years later, this is actually the way my father would handle it. He would handle it in a very calm, reasonable way. So Kenny, in playing my father in my remake of Walking Distance, really played the part the way my father would behave, very reasonably. And it's very interesting that Kenny looks more like my father than I do. I come from one of those families where nobody looks like anybody else. But they are my real parents. So I called Kenny and said, Kenny, I want to do a remake of a Twilight Zone episode. And of course, Kenny and Kim are the professionals. They've done their own productions before, and they are my personal friends, and I have acted in some of their own productions. So Kenny said, Frank, I think it's a great idea, and I'll be happy to do the filming, and I really just want to concentrate on that. And I said, Kenny, you don't understand. You are my father. In this episode, you look like my father, you have that same personality, you have to act in this episode. You are perfect to play Frank Bell Sr., and so he did.
My experience in Walking Distance was a very good one. I have to start out by thanking Frank, actually, to have me film this production for him. It was very flattering that he chose me, and I thank you for that, Frank. It was a great time. Walking Distance is one of my favorite Twilight Zone episodes, so that made it extra special for me. I know in the beginning when he wanted me to film, he also wanted me to be in it, which at the time I really didn't want to be in it. But he actually, he said, well, Ken, look, he goes, you look like my dad. And that was a very important part of the Walking Distance film, because obviously the guy goes back in time and, and his dad's in it, so obviously that was what I did. So I decided to do it, and it was fun, and I enjoyed it, and I'm glad I did it. I had a great time that whole weekend. We did a lot of fun things. It was crazy at times, but I have to give Frank a lot of credit with his organization. He had everything lined up, bang, 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 we knocked it out, really without any problems, and usually you have problems. We did have a few, but it really wasn't a factor in this thing. It really ran pretty smooth, and that makes things extra special that way. I also would like to thank the cast that I filmed and worked with. Just an incredible story of how Frank got all these kids that he didn't know and to be in this thing, and they all committed and they all were there. They all did a very professional job, no matter what age they were. Between anywhere from the kids to the adults, everyone did a fabulous job, and it was very impressive to watch them do their thing. And so it was a great experience overall, and I was glad to be a part of it.
Kim Arnott-Weidman is the only professional actress in this entire production. And all of the parts in this 25-minute production are all very small parts. But because Kim was the professional, I needed her to play the part of my grandmother. The problem with that is Kim had to do two things that no other actor had to do in this production. Number one, she had to make herself up to be older, because if she was going to be the age of my grandmother, in those days, 35 years ago, that I go back to, Kim had to look about 70, so she had to be substantially older than she is in real life. And she would be the one person who could tackle that. The second thing was learning a language that she doesn't know. My grandmother spoke only Italian, and that's something that really would be lost if I had the character speak English, because that's not really the way it was done. So Kim learned these lines on her own, and I helped her with them, and she actually had someone in Pennsylvania helping her. But it's not merely a matter of memorizing the lines. You have to show the proper feeling. And when you watch the episode, I think my facial expression, when I'm actually approaching my grandmother in the past and seeing her alive again, I felt as if I really wasn't even acting. When I saw Kim as my grandmother and speaking the Italian, it was just a magnificent performance by Kim to be able to tackle that. And the episode needed it, because I couldn't go back in time to my past without having my grandmother in the episode. So that was the one small scene that I added that was not in the original Walking Distance. It was the scene with my grandmother in front of the house.
Mi dispiace, ma non ti conosco. You see, Frankie? I still can remember it. Anyway, working on Walking Distance with Frank Bell was a wonderful experience. I'll never forget our weekend in New York. I actually went around New York like this because Frank was driving. And it was quite an experience. I first worked with Frank when I put him in our film, Curse of the Full Moon. And he did pretty good. He played the part of King Johnny, and I thought everyone worked well together. Then Frank asked me to play the part of his grandmother. Now that was not an original part to Walking Distance. Frank added that because he wanted to include his grandmother, and which I thought was a great idea. And I was flattered that he asked me, and I had a great time playing his grandmother. She must have been a lovely woman. And it was hard work that weekend. Cold nights, chilly days, and but a lot of fun. Met a lot of nice people. Got to know more about New York. Like I said, the driving, no. So that was not good. But and the subway, well, that was not good. But after we got over that, then the rest was good. And it was a great experience. So I thank you very much, Frank. I enjoyed it. And I know everyone's going to love Walking Distance. Thanks. Ciao.
Maria Romer, the actress who played my mother, again, was someone who had never acted before. Maria is one of the owners of the gym where I go. So Maria only knew me as a customer in the gym. So again, even though she knew me as some guy who works out in the gym, you can just imagine her reaction when I approached her and said, "How would you like to play my mother in a remake of a Twilight Zone episode?" So her reaction was, well, why me? And I said, well, you have the personality for it. Maria is very outgoing. And frankly, she is the same type that my mother was back in those days. Very Italian looking, thin, jet black hair, and has that same personality. Now, of course, when my mother sees this episode, she is absolutely going to freak out to see someone who is so pretty, so beautiful, playing her 35 years ago, because whenever somebody is playing you in a film, you always want them to be great looking so that people think that's what you really look like. So it's really going to be quite a pleasant surprise for my mother when she sees Maria playing her. And Maria was just magnificent, had never acted before, knew all her lines, really played it the way a mother is supposed to play it, who now sees this man who's 45 years old and is claiming to be her son from 30 years ago. And just as it was in the original episode, my mother would have been more hysterical about it, which is how Maria played the part, unlike Kenny playing my father, who would have been a little more calm and a little more down to earth about playing it. So Maria was absolutely magnificent in the episode, and she played my mother to the T.
Honestly, I didn't know what to say. Yeah, I had seen the original episode, and I was really getting into character. I saw there was a part where I would have to slap you, and I was okay with doing that, but then you decided that wasn't how you wanted it to go, so we just decided to change it up and just hit the wallet instead. It was exciting. It was great to be part of the production. I think it was very exciting for Autumn to be in it, playing your sister. I think it's an experience we'll remember forever, because I don't think it's something we would do again. But it was exciting, and I love that she was a part of it as well. It's like a memory we will always have.
Now, my sister in the episode is played by Autumn Romer, the daughter of, the real-life daughter of Maria Romer, who played my mother. And in real life, my sister is the older sister, but this is one of the dramatic corrections that we had to make given the actors who were available. So in the episode, Autumn plays my sister, actually is the younger sister in the episode. And my favorite actors are always the kids, starting with the little ones. So we had 3 little ones who acted in this episode, and they were all magnificent. Autumn Romer played my sister beautifully in her interaction with my grandmother, and they were in the same scene. So again, a very brief scene, but very important.
I mean, I liked it. I was a little shy to even do anything, but like, I was a little happy that I didn't have that much to do. So I guess I was just fine with doing it. I really didn't care about the camera. I guess I was just focused on acting more than really anything. I was so shy about everything. Everything was on my mind, so I don't know, it was just, the camera was on my mind, acting was on my mind. I think this was it. I mean, I do like a small thing like that again, but I'm never like gonna do that for like my real job.
Benjamin Triumphal, one of the other children, played a little kid with really no dialogue, but he is the kid in the scene where the woman in the park, he is her son and she's calling him down from the monkey bars, and I instructed him on what I wanted him to do, and again, he was great, and we gave him the name of Louis. In the original episode, he was Bobby, but I renamed the character Louis after my friend Louis from when I was a child, because all of the parts in my remake have the names of people who really existed. They are all real people from my past. So Benjamin was just terrific in that part.
I liked the episode because it was fun.
The other child who actually had the biggest part is my cousin, actually my second cousin, Jamie, who plays the little girl in the park. Now, interestingly, Jamie is playing the Ronnie Howard part from the original. In the original, Gig Young encounters this little boy who's playing with marbles. And in my episode, we did a remake in the original schoolyard where I played as a child, and we used the pink handball. So Jamie is playing the Ronnie Howard part, and it's interesting. Ronnie Howard in Walking Distance, we all know Ronnie Howard as an Academy Award-winning director. We know him as Richie from Happy Days, and we know him as Opie from the Andy Griffith Show. This was before all of that. This is maybe Ronnie Howard as a 4 or 5-year-old. And Jamie and I rehearsed these lines, and she was just great. She knew all of her lines. She even knew the lines after filming the episode. She continues to know her lines. She was wonderful in saying that, you're not Frankie Bell. I know Frankie Bell, and you're not him running away. Very similar to what Ronnie Howard had to do. So if I had to say my 3 favorite actors, of course it's going to be the kids, the 3 little ones.
When Frank asked me to be in the movie, I felt a little excited, but mostly nervous. I felt nervous because when I was asked to be in a movie, I'm not really in that much films, except for mine on my iPod, and this is my first time in a movie. Well, I appreciated the movie very much, but I still want to be a different job. The type of job I want to be is maybe a veterinarian. It wasn't really hard to remember the lines because I did them over and over every night after homework because I was really excited. Well, actually, that was the first time I've heard of Twilight Zone, but I was still very excited to be in the movie. It was a very different experience, and some older people and my friends, they also tell me that it's always good to try new things. Even if you fail, it's good to try than not do it at all.
I also loved the teenagers in this episode, and I'm going to refer to Frankie Wiederholt. He's the kid who plays me as a 10-year-old. I'm going to refer to him as a teenager. Frankie was a very interesting choice. In addition to actually having Frankie as his real name, which is a coincidence. It was not my intention. I had asked the principal of St. Matthias School if she knew any kids who could play me as a 10-year-old in a Twilight Zone remake. So Barbara Wenis, who was the principal of St. Matthias, recommended Frankie Wiederholt to me. And when I met him and I met his family, a couple of things stood out about Frankie. First of all, he was bigger than I was when I was a 10-year-old. When I was 10 years old, I was a skinny kid, a small kid, and I was the fastest runner in the neighborhood. Frankie was actually 12 years old when he was playing the part of me as a 10-year-old, which already made him bigger, and he's a big kid as it is. I looked like maybe a defensive back or a wide receiver. Frankie looks like a tight end or even an offensive lineman. I mean, the kid is a bull. So he didn't really look the way I did, and he certainly doesn't look like the fastest runner in the neighborhood. But he had that baby face. He was very excited about the Twilight Zone, and what I was very impressed by is that he made sure to watch the original episode before I ever met him. So he was prepared. He knew his lines, and he was great. And poor Frankie spent the whole episode running away from me. Basically, it's me chasing this kid, this poor kid running through the park as I'm screaming after him, Frankie, Frankie. And then when we had the scene where Frankie was going to hurt himself, he wanted to actually jump off the landing and land on the ground. And I said, no, I don't think we'll do that. I said, we'll film you right up until the time that you jump. We'll cut away, and then we'll have you on the ground. I didn't want anybody to hurt themselves. So that famous scene where Martin Sloan, or in my case, Frankie Bell, hurts his leg, and then of course I fall down and hurt my leg at the same time, and that explains the limp that I'm walking with throughout the episode, came from when I was a child and being chased by my older self. And what was funny about Frankie, at one point, we didn't do outtakes or bloopers to put on a DVD, but it would have been funny if we did, because when I first started chasing him, yelling, Frankie, Frankie, he actually stopped and turned around and asked me what I wanted. I said, you're not supposed to do that, you're supposed to be running away from me. But we filmed it, and that's through the magic of film. You keep doing take after take. And Frankie really nailed it. I was very happy with him.
What I thought of the Walking Distance episode, well, it was good. It was one of my, actually, I watched other Twilight Zone episodes, and it was one of my favorites, actually. Yes. Basically, I just practiced at my home, and my siblings helped me out. Well, it was pretty fun. I mean, it taught me a lot about movie magic, of how I jumped and then they cut the scene, and then the next scene I'm on the floor, so it looks like I fell. And so I think I learned a lot from the chasing and everything. We were in 2 separate parks, but it looked like we were in one park, so that's how it taught me about movie magic.
The 4 teenagers that are in this production, I had not met them before I needed them for this production. And again, I picked actors because I liked them, and they had the personality for it. So I went to the local high school in Ridgewood, Grover Cleveland High School, and I spoke to the drama instructor, Miss Bloomfield, Tanya Bloomfield, and I said, I need 4 teenagers for this production. She recommended 4, and I met with them first at the school. And as a high school administrator myself, as a dean, I know how teenagers think. I have some experience with teenagers. So when I spoke to these teenagers, I realized that no matter how smart they may be, teenagers can often be absent-minded, they can forget things, they can't necessarily be always reliable. And I spoke to them and I said, if you really want to get into this profession, because they are drama students, you're going to have to be reliable. I can't have anyone who's not reliable. You're going to have to know your lines. You're going to have to be there when I need you to be there. And these kids were really great. Every time I had to meet them, they were not only on time, they were early. They watched the episode, they studied it, and they all knew their lines. Now, they did not have a lot of lines, but whatever lines they had, they put all their energy to it. So you had Josue, who played the teenager with the new car. Now, in the original Walking Distance, it was a car with some sort of jumper seat. In the new, my version, it was a Camaro with a spoiler. So my father had a Camaro Z28 with a spoiler, so I used that car. And Josue was great. He's this teen that's asking me, you know, this is brand new. You don't know this car. You don't know what year it is. And then that's when I realized that I'm back in time. Selene played the mother in the park who's calling the boy Louis. So Selene actually had to play someone a little bit older, and she knew her lines very well. She did have a lot of lines, and she studied them, and I think she did a great job, especially because she had to keep turning away from the camera and looking at the monkey bars. It was not an easy take. There was noise going on around us, but she was great. And then the two teens in the candy store at the end didn't have a lot of lines, but again, they knew the part. It was a scene that I had created. This was Natalie and Jaden, and they played it perfectly. I couldn't be happier with the four teenagers, the four drama students that I got from Grover Cleveland High School.
It was a good experience being on the set and working with everybody, like Frank and all that. I'm back in drama class again, so that's cool, yeah. But as for like a career in it, I don't think I'm gonna aspire to be an actor. I was familiar with the Twilight series and all that stuff. Phenomenal episode, crazy.
Mr. Rieger. All of us have a Mr. Rieger in our past. The old guy who owns the candy store, and we have memories of him, or the old guy who owns the newsstand or the laundromat. And I needed a part to play Mr. Rieger, who in the original Walking Distance was Mr. Wilson. Mr. Rieger, of course, is a real person. And he owned the candy store on the corner where I lived on Center Street. And we would go in there to buy penny candy. And I always remember Mr. Rieger, who then was already an old man, always walking out of the stockroom with something while Mrs. Rieger was in front. Occasionally they would have somebody working there, but it was always Mr. and Mrs. Rieger. Well, I needed someone to play Mr. Rieger. Fred Pienkos is, let's say, an elderly gentleman from the gym. And again, it's just someone I know from the gym. And I went to Fred and I said I needed somebody, an older guy, to play a part in a Twilight Zone remake. And again, Fred is one of those guys, he's like the mayor of the gym. Everybody knows Fred. And I hear rumors that he's in his 70s. But Fred said to me, well, I don't think I can play the part because I'm only 40. At which point, Fred's wife, Pat, hands me her glasses and says, if you think Fred looks 40, you need these glasses. So I said, all right, Fred, I said, but there's only one line that you need to know. Two lines, actually. And he said, that's all right, I think that's all I can retain at this point. But again, Fred was wonderful because he has that outgoing personality, had never acted before. He's the biggest New York Giants fan in the world, and that's what he's usually talking about. But he was great, he was prepared, and he certainly did Mr. Rieger proud.
Well, Frank approached me in the fourth gym and he asked me to play the part of Mr. Rieger. So I figured this way. He gave an old man's part to an old man. But the age of 40 was 34 years ago. So I'm only actually 6. That's what I figured for. 34, 6. So I'm a 6-year-old. That looks old.
Mentally.
Well, I was walking on the treadmill. Frank came over and he asked me would I like to be in a play, Twilight Zone. And I figured, yeah, why not? I figured the residuals would be great. I could pay for my season tickets next year. Well, you know what it is? I got that craft disease. I can't remember a freaking thing. So that one line was just enough.
Oh.
Well, I'm 74 and I'm halfway to 140, but the pages are getting a little short, so whatever I can grab, I'll take. Thank you for asking me for my little part. I really enjoyed it. And if anything ever happens to come up again, I'm willing to participate. And thank you.
Very interesting about the opening scene in the candy store, in Rieger's candy store. And it's in that scene where the viewer realizes that I've gone back in time, but I don't yet realize it myself. And this is before Mr. Rieger comes out and reveals that he's still alive. I'm referring to Mr. Rieger as someone who had died years ago. And the person playing that part is my cousin Maureen, and obviously we've known each other all our lives. So there was some sort of an inside joke At one point, she's standing behind the counter, and I said to Maureen, "You look familiar to me. Have I seen you before?" And of course, her line was, "I got that kind of face." So Maureen and I had to keep a straight face in that line. Of course, the irony is, of course, I've seen her before. She's the one person in this whole production that I've known all my life. And she came prepared, dressed as someone who would be, running a candy store, working in a candy store 30 years ago. So it was really funny. I was very happy to have my cousin, who is the chiropractor in the gym, playing the soda jerk from the past in this episode. Maureen was great. I was so happy to have her in there.
Yeah, I knew Frank since he was a baby, but I'm not going to tell you about any of that. Well, when Frank asked me to play the part, I had no choice because he's my cousin. So I was not thrilled, naturally, but I did it because I had to do it. While we were rehearsing, Frank said, "Who are you?" And I said, "Who the F are you?" Okay? And I got a particular look that you might see later on. I was familiar with the Twilight Zone before, so I enjoyed some of the episodes, but this one I hadn't seen. I thought memorizing the lines was fairly easy. As far as doing the actual acting that went along, I think the director helped a lot in helping me to bring out what needed to be brought out at the time.
Rodney Jones plays the part of the soda jerk in the present, and Rodney was someone that I've known many years. He's one of the few people who I've known a lot of years. Everyone else I pretty much just know from the neighborhood and from the gym more recently. Rodney was a big Twilight Zone fan, and he had great enthusiasm to be in this episode. And I used him for the part of the soda jerk in the final scene. When I come back in time, I'm back in the present, and he's kind of confused about these strange questions I'm asking about Mr. Rieger, and I'm referring to the basketball courts, and he's the one who says they condemned those years ago, and Mr. Rieger died 20, 30 years ago. So I think Rodney was really a natural for that part because he was such a Twilight Zone fan already.
I've watched the Twilight Zone since I was a kid. I loved all of it. I thought it was great. I thought it was a great episode. Well, it was good to play a jerk for real. A soda jerk. It was a lot of fun. It was something different to do.
Mike Porcelli, outside of me, is probably the person who is most playing himself. He plays the garage mechanic. He's a garage mechanic in real life. He's been my mechanic for some 20 years. And I think Mike is the only one who didn't memorize his lines because he didn't have to. Because all of the lines are things that he would be saying anyway, except for telling me Ridgewood is about a mile and a half down the road. So Mike is the one who let me use his convertible, because that convertible I'm using in the episode is not really mine, it's Mike's. He's the one who gave me the Camaro Z28 for the episode, so Mike came in very handy in addition to acting and using his garage, Central Avenue Automotive. So Mike was terrific in the episode. I was very lucky to have him.
I helped a friend who produced an independent film a few years ago. We supplied cars for the film and I had a small part in it. I've done some TV news stories and I'm on the radio every week. My wife and I are on the Auto Lab radio show every Saturday. We answer everybody's live questions for 2 hours, anything that's auto related, anything to do with cars. Luckily, we had those 2 cars in stock. They'd been sitting around waiting for work, and they worked out, I guess, exactly the way you need it. It's a 78 or 79 Camaro, Z28, has rear spoilers on it. Actually, it has spoilers all around. But I think the scene needed that spoiler, so it was a lucky thing we had it. Convertible is a 2003 Chrysler Sebring. That's been sitting, waiting to have work done. We've been in business there for 64 years. Wow. It was a very interesting experience. I can't wait to see it.
Frank Cofiniola was the one person in this whole episode who actually not only knew the episode of Walking Distance, but knew the name of the original person, Martin Sloan. So I said, this is a man that I want in the episode. Well, Frankie is, of course, this big burly guy from the gym, and he was going to have the part of picking up Frankie, me as a 10-year-old, and walking away with him. So I really enjoyed it. It's what I would call certainly a cameo part. but he does have a speaking line, and I got a big kick out of having Frankie in this episode. So there actually are 3 actors whose real name is Frank in the episode, and 3 of the characters are named Frank. So I enjoyed having Big Frankie from the gym. All of my actors are either from the gym or from the neighborhood.
Well, I knew this episode very well. It was one that was near and dear to my heart. Matter of fact, when they show the marathons, it's one that I sit on the edge of my seat and wait for that one to come on. When Frank asked me to be in a movie, I was very surprised and kind of flattered in a way. I had some reservations because I didn't think I could do it. I always wanted to be an actor, in the past and the future, but I never took any steps towards that. Maybe this will be my big break. I'm looking forward to seeing the finished product, and I hope I did a good job in, putting across the part that I was given.
My editor, Megan Hughes, did a remarkable job in this. For people who don't know, and I didn't know either, when one of these films is shot, every take is like another photograph. So in other words, when you take photos on a digital camera and then you download them onto your computer, if you took 53 photos, the photos are numbered 1 to 53. Well, when you're using a digital camera for a film like this, it's the same thing. If a take is 10 seconds, that's like one photograph. If the next take is a minute and a half, that's the second one. So all of the takes are numbered on the computer, just like photographs. When we finished this episode, there were some 260 takes. That's a lot to go through. So I had to go through all of them and pick out which ones worked best, and that's why all of the actors did so many takes. Well, I fed those takes to Megan, giving her a rough idea and instructions on which ones I wanted to use, and in what order I wanted to use them, and which takes would be close-ups and which would be long shots, and then she just took over from there. Megan was magnificent. She did so much work on her own, and I finally made 2 trips there, and she was the one who was responsible for the fades, fade to black, for a quick fade, for those quick shots that add drama to it, where all of the camera work is you have all of these takes. Megan really put them together to make such a wonderful episode. She was responsible for incorporating the music that I picked, and she put it right where I wanted it. And I think that not only the Bernard Herrmann music, the original Twilight Zone music, but also the songs that I picked that I think did well with the episode. Because when the actors are acting, they don't hear that music. They don't hear anything. The music is added later, and the viewer generally doesn't know a thing like that. So it was something where I saw her editing skills, and I'm just so happy that Megan did a wonderful job. I'm so grateful for the jobs she did.
Working on this project with Frank was really easy because he knew exactly what he wanted. He had very thorough notes. He had a vision in mind, and basically he did a lot of the grunt work that a lot of editors usually have to do. He plowed through all the footage and knew exactly which shots he liked, which shots he didn't, and where they would go, and when I would cut to which shot. So really a lot of the decision making was already done for me. So really what happened was my technical skills came into play. I could get things done that I knew that he wanted, but a lot of the creativity was all in Frank's head. And like I said, he did a lot of the work. He's very hardworking. He did a lot of the work and made my job a lot easier as an editor. Where challenges did come up for me, which allowed me to use a more creative side of my experience, would be when issues came up having to do with the fact that this was a low-budget film. What happens a lot with low-budget movies is if something is filmed and you find out there's an audio issue or someone didn't say the line right or something like that, you can't go back and reshoot. So you just got to use what you got. So that's where editors can come in to try to mask some of the errors and get creative with putting some footage over audio that doesn't technically go with that scene, but it still works. It's a lot of problem solving that I really enjoy about editing, and I love getting creative and digging in and trying to make the best project out of whatever I'm given. like I said, this project went pretty smoothly because Frank made a lot of the creative choices, but I really enjoyed working on it. Twilight Zone is a television show that everyone grows up knowing. It was obviously before my time, but I grew up seeing it on TV reruns, seeing it in school classrooms and things like that. And it's just a classic. This particular episode I was not familiar with, but I only learned about it through Frank. And it's a good one. It's got a lot of great messages in it about growing up and accepting adulthood while still carrying your childhood with you. It's a great one.
Tony Triguardo is the media person at the Port Washington Library, where I'm constantly taking out videos and I'm constantly taking out books, and we're always talking about media. And Tony is one of these guys who's a man of the world. He's friends with Simon and Garfunkel. He doesn't like Paul Simon, but Art Garfunkel is a great guy. So he's somebody who knows everybody. And little did I know that Tony was a sound man. So I was telling him about this Twilight Zone episode, and we had already filmed it. And I was telling him how I needed sound done on the episode. And he's talking all this mumbo-jumbo that I don't understand. And finally he came up with this great idea. Why don't I handle the sound for you? So I said, I think that's a fabulous idea. So when Megan Hughes and I, my film editor, had completed the actual film editing, the visual editing of the episode, I just gave the DVD to Tony and said, see what you can do, because what happens is the only microphone is the microphone that's on the camera. So if someone turns sideways or if it's a long shot, you can't really hear them. And when Tony gave me back the episode remastered, he actually gave me 3 versions. And Megan and I decided which version, and actually which parts of each version we were going to use, and he upped the sound of the people speaking the dialogue while keeping the background noise as low as possible, because this was not a production where we had permits to cordon off the streets. The background noise that you hear in the episode was really there. So Tony had to get rid of a hum that was in the candy store, had to get rid of some traffic noise. It was a tough job, but I think under the circumstances, the sound was magnificent. So I'm really as grateful to Tony as I am to Megan. My 2 editors were just magnificent.
When Frank approached me to do the sound, he had already shot the episode, and because it's so difficult, you're shooting outside, and you're not shooting on a professional sound studio, sound line. There are going to be problems with the audio. There's going to be background noise, going to be things happening. But I knew that it was really a labor of love for Frank. I knew he really wanted to have this look as good as it could, sound as good as it could. And it was very interesting, something Frank said. With an episode like this, the dialogue is so important. And it really is. And having seen the episode and how everyone was really trying to really just put the story across so well, I was glad that I was able to make the changes to the sound that they needed to sort of enhance it and get rid of a lot of the background sounds and things like that. So it was a fun project to work on, definitely. Well, it was interesting because I grew up with the Twilight Zone, and I grew up a fan. I work at the media department over in the Port Washington Library, and we circulate copies of the Twilight Zone all the time. But I really didn't remember the episode Walking Distance until Frank sort of gave me the background of the plot. It sort of dawned on me, I said, yeah, I definitely have seen that, but it had been years since I'd seen the original one. And, we remember all the common episodes. We remember everything, Frank and I were talking about the episode with Burgess Meredith and the episodes with Jack Klugman, and these are the ones that sort of are like always in the top of the list when people talk about the Twilight Zone. But it was such a poignant episode, and I really had forgotten it, but having seen the finished production that Frank did, it's a great story. He told it really well, so it's great.